Well, after finding out that the first style of my letters was incorrect, you remember I redid those, and I have this first panel, the Smith Manufacturing Company, Chicago, Illinois. And then I took the Chicago, Illinois and just single lined it in. It doesn't look like it has the same structure as these other letters. It'll be just a simple letter style. And then on the Great Western Endless Apron, this was the first one that I did. And it was pretty much in that standard block style as well, which now we know was not right. And I redid that into now the newer style. The A of the apron still has a long tail like the other one. And for some reason, the S of spreader on manure spreader was enlarged, but that's what it showed like it was on the new one, so I did that on this as well. The Great and Western is more expanded out than it was on the other one, but I think this one is closer to being correct. So the question I get asked regularly is by folks who come and visit, and some of you on the comments, how am I going to get it off of this tracing paper onto the side of the panels of manure spreader? Well, there's two different ways I can do it, and I've done it both ways. One method is to use this transfer paper. It is basically a carbon back paper like you would use in the old style typewriters, except you can get this in different colors, and I have one here that is in white. And it can be put underneath this tracing paper and then traced over top. I'll put it under here. Then you can trace over top on the letters, and it will transfer a white line onto the red paint of this panel, and that gives you an indication where their letters need to be, and you can paint within those lines. And depending upon the color that I put letters on, if it is a tan, a white, perhaps a yellow, I'll use a black or a blue for a tracing paper, because if I put my second method on it, which I'll describe here in a minute, it doesn't really show up. So I want a black letter line on a light background. This red is kind of in the dark category, so I would like a lighter background. So I can use perhaps this transfer paper in white, or there's a second method that some of you are familiar with. It's called pouncing. And I do think I'm going to try both with the scrap of this tracing paper. I can try the transfer like I just described, or I can do it pouncing. Now, pouncing involves just taking a pin or a needle and going along the outside outline of the letters and perforating it. And then I take a small bag filled with baby powder, or like talc, I use baby powder, in a small bag, and you just dust it. Well, that dust goes through that perforation and leaves that mark on the panel that you want to paint. That's called pouncing. I'm going to try both and see which one works best for me. And to pounce, you just go along the edge and you just create a whole bunch of perforation marks along that line that you just sketched out. So you can see that's kind of a tedious, long process. So this E is what we just perforated. And then as a comparison, I'm going to take a piece of transfer paper and put it underneath this manure word. Hold it in place, and then it's just a matter of tracing over what I've already done. I'll just do the M here. And for my pouncing bag, I just take one layer of a bathroom tissue, and I put baby powder on it. And I fold it up, make it into a little bag. I'm going to do this quite a bit. I'll take a small piece of string and just tie that together. For here, I probably wouldn't have to do that, because I'm just going to experiment which one I like. But that becomes my little pouncing bag. So I should be able to just dust over this E. Let's see what we have. So here you can see the outline of the E, maybe not as clearly as the outline of the M. So you can go back and just erase these when you're done. So maybe the transfer paper might be a little more distinct and a little more clear. That might be the way I go. So the transfer paper might be a better application on this red. Where I do prefer the pouncing bag and the perforated letters is when I am putting stripes or letters on a black finish. The process of tracing out with tracing paper, because it takes a little pressure, when you have a really shiny, smooth black surface, that can stand out. And when I put a dust, this baby powder, through the perforations on that black, it doesn't make any imprint on that black finish. The white really stands out, and it gives me a nice outline to follow when I do that. It's very sensitive to being touched and brushed, but black is where I like pouncing. I think I'm going to do the transfer paper on this for the red. It's not a really smooth finish anyway. I can stand the tracing, and it might be a little more time efficient and maybe a little clearer lines that I can follow when I paint this on. Now the real test is to see how we went. Seems like there should be a drum roll or something. There you go. As often as I've done this, invariably I miss a letter or a side of a letter, something. But bottom line, this is just a guideline. I think that'll work. Putting this on in a transfer form is just to give me a guideline, so hopefully I can get that done relatively well. So another thing I would like to make a request for, some of you have sent me colorized pictures of that pre-1904 manure sprayer being operated. Is there anybody that can do that on this black and white that I'm using for these letters? I have kind of a notion in my head. One is looking at that front axle. On both the colored advertising picture and this black and white picture, and on the front of that axle, there's a kind of a floral design. Can anybody colorize that so I can see what it is? In the color picture, you can see it, but it's not very clear. And I'm curious about the Smith Manufacturing. That looks to me like it is definitely black. From the color advertising, I'd say both of them are black. That seems to be pretty obvious. But when I look at the yellow stripe around these borders on the second panel that has Great Western Endless Apron, I'm kind of wondering if those letters aren't the same shade as the yellow stripe. The black bold stripe seems to be a little bolder. So I'm just kind of curious, is the Smith Manufacturing black and the Great Western Apron yellow? If we colorize this, if you colorize that, I don't know how to do it, would that reveal that, or is it all in black? Just kind of curious. Lots of you are more tech savvy that way than I am. We'll see what you come up with. Well, this gives you a little bit of a feel of how I put lettering on the side of a wagon or coach or buggy, whatever. I'm going to let this dry. As you can tell as I'm working my stick around that I have to be careful that I'm not running into other letters that still have wet paint. When I get into letters that are this close, typically I would do every other letter to give me some room to maneuver, let that dry, and then I'll come back and put in the alternating letters and do that, and then come down and finish it up. So I have to be kind of careful with the wet paint that's on there. This kind of gives you a taste of how I put lettering on. Appreciate you following along. Thanks for watching.